Well, it was a bit of a sense of deja vu for Argyle and their trip to Cardiff. 4-0 they lost on the weekend after what had been a really positive week for the Greens. 2 goals in either half meant that Cardiff continued their march at the top of the table, but it is a different story for Tom Cleverley and Plymouth Argyle. This is Argyle Analysis, and we'll be looking back through that game, maybe trying to find the reasons why the scoreline ended up the way it was. Joining me in the studio to talk through it is, of course, Aaron Cusack. And Aaron, it's not a happy hunting ground for Argyle, the Cardiff City Stadium. You've got to go back to Boxing Day 2009 for our last win there.
Oh, it was really disappointing, wasn't it? You know, obviously on the back of last season as well. I think that's 9-0 on aggregate up there. And like you've already alluded to, just going into the the game full of positivity after a positive week. I don't think anyone saw that result coming, but unfortunately it did.
Well, we'll go through it in detail, but I think it's probably worth mentioning a couple of things. Cardiff were very good. You can see why they're top of the league and have been doing what they're doing. But I feel a bit weird saying this after a 4-0 loss. Watching it, I didn't feel Argyle were as bad as a 4-0 loss suggests. I don't know how you saw everything.
No, I agree actually. I felt for them because when the third goal went in just after half-time, 2 deflections and a real top draw strike, I think everyone was just deflated, players as well. Like you think, how are we 3-0 down? And I didn't think they deserved to be 3-0 down at that stage so early in the second half. And then obviously the fourth goal later in the game, the last few minutes or moments, it kind of just capped it off. And it just didn't feel like it was that big a gulf when you were watching it live. Yeah,
well, it was, unfortunately, in reflection with the scoreline. Let's have a look at the goals that separated the teams. And, I mean, this was a beauty, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it was. I'm not sure he lit a better strike all year, Charlie. What a strike that is. And Wintle, he's probably not renowned for scoring lots of goals, but he's probably a great goal scorer because this is an example of someone hitting it so sweetly, and Lucas Ashby-Hammond no chance in the goal. And even in the build-up, you could argue, could you get a bit tighter here, there, or whatever? But it's just a brilliant strike. And then 2 or 3 minutes later, Willock with perhaps given a bit too much room to come inside, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. But Ashby-Hammond saving that, if it goes directly at him, it's just hit, I think, Wiredu, who's been really unfortunate, and it's directed into the goal. And then, those goals were like 2 or 3 minutes before half time, and then literally within 3 or 4 minutes of the second half, you think, right, rally the troops a little bit, and then this happens where Ruben Colwell, who I thought was Cardiff's best player, picks up the ball, bit of space, and then another deflection off of Wiredu again, who was really unfortunate, and again Ashby-Hammond no chance in the goal, and all of a sudden you're completely chasing it, and it's about damage limitation, and they'll be naturally disappointed. But again, I think Ashby-Hammond saves that if it goes directly to him. And then literally last kind of 2 minutes, this is in injury time, I think, Isaac Davies get a bit of room, wide left, cuts inside. This is where Lucas Ashby-Hammond would have been, disappointed if that had gone in. He'd want to save that as a routine save for someone of his level. But it just kind of capped off what was clearly then a real comfortable win when the final whistle finally went. Yeah,
looking back over it again, it doesn't get any easier, but it kind of is. It sums up what we were talking about at the beginning. They're sort of lucky goals, and I don't mean that in a kind of disparaging way to Cardiff, but 2 deflections are completely wrong for a keeper. That only happens against a side when the luck is against them, really, doesn't it? It just feels like that.
Yeah, it does seem. I agree with you, Charlie. It does seem to be that way, where when you're at the bottom and you're hoping for a bit of luck, things go against you. I mean, 2 deflections, an absolute screamer, and then the last one, were we chasing the game? The game is dead. As soon as the third went in, realistically, the game is dead. So it's about damage limitation, and then obviously it just compounds everything that's going on. But taking nothing away from Cardiff, they've started really well. 1 goal conceded all season, 3 wins out of 3 at home. They look really well drilled, really well set up, and they're going to be, whoever finishes above them will probably win the league. It seems at this stage.
Yeah, right. Let's let's kind of break down the game. We'll start at the very beginning, and it's been a theme throughout the season. Argyle's snappy starts, fast starts.
Yeah, I mean, this is where they'll be really pleased. I mean, the opening section, they're really snapping. I like the fact, Charlie, that they were harrying in 2s and 3s. You know, get on the front foot, make it difficult. Don't give Cardiff the opportunity to set their rhythm in tempo. And this all happened in the first, 3 to kind of 10 minutes, so to speak. And, it shows intent that harrying, hunting in packs, 2s, 3s, regain the ball. On another day, it falls for Caleb Watts a little bit cleaner and kinder. He might get a shot off. But it wasn't only the harrying up the top of the pitch, it was also in, the defending areas as well. Barley Mumba, Sorinola working together to really, compress any kind of space that Cardiff had in the opening exchanges, and that's what they would have wanted, to make it a bit frantic, to not allow Cardiff to get a foothold early and then dictate what went on. And when you see moments like that, you kind of think we are starting games fairly brightly, but obviously they're just not continuing into what we need is points on the board.
It's happened in every single game, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And although Saturday wasn't necessarily front foot chances like we've seen certainly in the home matches, it is something, like you say, you can't fault that the players aren't up for it. The next step will be like converting or something, or like getting in front of a game in that fast start when you are really on top.
I totally agree. There'll come moments, and we'll look over a little bit in a minute, where when you get into those positions that can be a difference maker, they've got to start taking chances. Because up until those, the first goal, it wasn't as if Cardiff were bombarding our goal. They had lots of possession, and I felt we were relatively comfortable out of possession. So not only were they really snappy in the opening exchanges, as the half wore on, they got in a couple of times, but it wasn't clear and obvious every time. And I thought collectively we were quite robust and well set, but we're not obviously allowing our opportunities to come to fruition when they arise going towards the opposite end.
Let's look at those defensive structures then, because as you say, we lost 4-0, but for 40 minutes.
I agree. I totally agree. And that's why we've selected the clips we have. Cardiff working the ball, but Argyle are well set here. It's almost like a 4-4-5-1, but they're well set. And what I like is naturally you always want to protect that central area, the box, defend it. But we're going to pick up Boateng, actually. So the ball goes wide. Sorinola and Mumba are fine. Maybe Mumba could be the other shoulder. But look at Boateng. He recognises that there's a bit of vulnerable space here. So he just marshals across and covers in, and that leads to him ushering the ball out of play. So really controlled moments. So as the ball is wide again, this was Cardiff's threat to kind of get in, break in lines, but Wiradu recognising it, protecting that space, and it looks fairly comfortable. So what we mean here, they're defending in balance. So they're not in transition, they're not out of balance, they're in balance. Alex Mitchell, he's recognising where dangers might be. We're really well set. We're a 3v2 in our favour. So you're marshalling those really vulnerable areas well. And for 35 minutes, it looked okay. Whilst Cardiff had a lot of the ball, it almost felt like, we could maybe turn a regain into a counter. And this was, a moment here that Such's defended the 1v1 moment really well. We've worked the ball out wide, and then Talai runs the last line, and it's a good ball over the top. And, he takes it down well. It's quite difficult. And you could argue there, that's kind of a half-ish chance, not a clear-cut chance. But up until they scored the first goal, for me, that felt the theme of the game. And then to go in 2-0 down, it was really kind of deflating.